Good afternoon, everyone. Today, for the next hour, Brad Harris and I from Full Spectrum Survival are going to discuss how to thrive in the grand solar minimum, how you can prepare right now for the changes to come, the signs around you that you're seeing, how can you get ready, how can you inform those around you, how can you get community involved. This is what we're going to discuss for the next hour. I hope it's really helpful for you. And also I encourage you to jump over to Brad's channel, Full Spectrum Survival. It's a plethora of information for you, for your personal knowledge, how to get ready for this, and how to just roll with these changes, and when others around you aren't prepared, how you can become the leader in that community because you have the skills. That's why I say jump over to Full Spectrum Survival. You're going to learn a lot from that channel. There's so much valuable knowledge there that we can be using over these next few years as things around us in our lives begin to change with rising food prices and the effects that go with that.
Have any words of wisdom there for what a person could do to realize those dangers and avoid them if possible?
It's going to come down. Those bees will be affected as well. When they were spraying for the Zika virus, everywhere they sprayed down in the South United States, they had massive extinction level events for the bee colonies down there.
Right.
Did a video on that as well, robo bees. So now they're coming out with these little tiny microscopic robots that they're going to try to use to repollinate our crops after all the bees are gone. I don't even know how you could wash that stuff off enough for you to be safe enough for you to consume that. I mean, already what's sprayed on the crops, how much do you need to wash it using salt water and several rinses to get the traditional, herbicides and pesticides off our crops? Now they're introducing something. How much human testing was done on this before it was just run through and now it's safe? That's going to be a difficult one there. And when I want to go back really quick. You ask about the crop losses. We're running at about even keel right now. There's a few million tons of excess, but this year, the yields have been chipped away. It's 5% here, 4% there, 3%, 6%. All around globally, almost all countries that produce food have had some loss this year, whether it be 3%, and France just lost an enormous over 20% of its wheat. What about next year when those numbers double? Once we get to that break-even point, it only takes a few percent losses globally to drive up prices exponentially. It doesn't work linearly like that. It loses 2% on a crop and then it raises 2% on price. No, it's more like it loses 2% and gains 20%. So these when we're going in the future, these little losses, watch for next year. Prices this year they're going to increase. You'll see food price increases, but next year it's going to be the talk of the town, if you will.
Now, as the Earth continues to experience extreme weather events, what's the likelihood that North America will experience flooding like they do in Asia on the rice crops?
Well, we saw that event in Louisiana earlier this year, and then all-time record snows in Boston, the 2014-15 winter. There's record snows all across the northeastern Canadian maritime area right now as we speak. All these cold records, and as the weather patterns change with La Nina as itself, we're talking about cyclical patterns. You have El Nino when the Pacific Ocean warms, and then you have La Nina when the Pacific Ocean cools. Now, if you look at maps, you can generally tell where it's going to be rainier, and just the regular La Nina pattern sets in motion flooding across the United States in a lot of areas. That's why year-on-year return yields generally on ag crops are down during La Nina times, because it ushers in an enormous amount of flooding and cloud cover, and these kind of events are associated with La Nina.
Now, I want to jump back just a minute here, and we discussed the carbon footprint a little bit. We touched on it a little bit. We discussed the human effect on climate change. And of course, climate change, like you said, is not synonymous with global warming. The climate is changing. There is no deniability over that, in my opinion, at least. Why is there such a blame game for the humans' part in this?
You had to give an excuse. If they knew the cyclical patterns were coming again, let's say we were the world body 30 years ago and we knew this, we have 30 years to prepare. Now, how everybody's going to see the weather changes.
Now,
it's just a simple ploy to have an excuse for when you ask the question. They already gave you the answer before you even asked it. Now it's become a religion.
Yeah, right.
Dividing people. I can't even have a conversation with a lot of people about this without being yelled at, shut down, or whatever within 2 minutes of even bringing up the idea that we could be going into a grand solar minimum. And they're like, well, the heating will outdo the cold.
Yeah, right.
Well, not really, because the modern minimum was -3°C. It dropped the entire global temperature 3 degrees Celsius. And they're talking about 1.5°C warming over a whole century. We're talking about a -3 to -2°C drop within the next 7 years. That's not going to outdo the warming. No way.
I think you brought up a great point of that there, and kind of answers the whole thing. And it's seen over and over again by governments around the world, divide. And like you said, you can't bring it up with some people. I mentioned cyclical climate change on the channel, and I'm a shill for one side or the other. And I could be saying one thing, and the one side will say I'm a shill for the other side, and that side will say I'm a shill for the other side. And there really is a great division there. And I think at the root of this, it's just based upon misinformation and a personal misunderstanding. So I especially like what you're doing at Adapt 2030, and that is disseminating the truth and gathering together patterns that people can see and start to understand themselves. What gave you the passion to start doing that?
When I saw these crop losses in Myanmar, I had believed in the global warming CO2 idea all the way until, say, 2013, just 3 years ago or so. And once we started to see these losses from 2012, and then it happened again in 2013, and then we went on another buying trip in 2014, and whoa, we lost more. Top leaf cover damaged from freezing, literally Myanmar, down near the equator, losing coffee production because the top leaves froze.
Yeah, crazy from a couple of years back.
And I had to look for some answers, and I was trying to do a forecast out for 5 years, like what our supply capacity would be. And I just had to really look into this, and I stumbled across John Casey's work. And once I saw John Casey's explanation of the cyclical patterns of cooling, I really looked into these grand solar minimums, and it only took me a very short amount of time to understand, oh yeah, these things repeat, and this is a great explanation of why everything's starting to be in flux right now. But they need to give you an excuse, because you are certainly going to see the changes firsthand.
Well, I think that we've discussed the government's need to withhold information, and they withhold that information based on their need to govern the people and to keep chaos to a minimum and to keep division as far as people not quitting their jobs, keep those cogs rolling. There is some compelling information out there about secrets withheld in other civilizations, secrets withheld in the Vatican right now. Do you have any information on that?
Well, I won't go super deep into it, but you must think these societies that were worshiping the sun and worshiping the universe and looking at star entities, and the priests would look at the sky for thousands of years in meticulous records, and they knew when the eclipses were coming. We couldn't even do that really until the late 1800s with our own mathematics and forecasting out. How did they have all that information to be able to forecast and create calendars?
Right.
They have an enormous body of knowledge. And when 500 years ago, when the explorations and our conquistadors and the Europeans went out with their navies and went to all these new lands, there was a huge repository of information. I really do not firmly believe that they burned all that stuff that they claimed they have. I really believe it was boxed up and carted back, looked at, surveyed, because I sure wouldn't break tablets that were so intricate that I'd never seen anything like that. You can imagine Europeans rocking over into somewhere in the Central American kingdoms and seeing their artwork and all the steles and this amazing, oh my, would you burn that? You would bring it back to study it. I really believe that's what they did. They have this full knowledge of what the cycles are, far above what we do right now. I mean, they probably have records going back 30, 50, 100,000 years or more based on the cyclical patterns of what the ancients had carved in stone. You can't tell me they burned every single papyrus or whatever they were using on plant fiber-based papers at that time. Just impossible. They boxed it up and took it back.
Well, there's actually some written proof of that, some documented proof that that was part of their religious governance at the time, was to box up and hide any information that could, be. Information has always been key, but information that was useful to other religions or other areas. So